My mother forgot to save me a seat at her birthday dinner. Not accidentally. Not last minute. She texted me 12 hours in advance, just enough time to make it look polite. Oops, we forgot your seat tonight. So embarrassing. You know how these things get. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I didn't understand it, because I wanted to feel exactly how little it was supposed to mean. My husband, Ethan, was standing across the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his coffee, watching the morning like it owed him nothing. When I showed him the message, he didn't react right away. He read it once, slowly, set his mug down, and said, almost too calmly, "What time?" "7," I said. "The Rosewood Grill." He nodded once, not surprised, not confused, just confirming something he already knew. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't new. It just finally had a timestamp. That morning had started like any other quiet Saturday. The kind where the house feels earned, not empty. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in thin, quiet lines. My laptop sat open on the table, half-finished work staring back at me like it expected more effort than I was willing to give. Everything was normal, peaceful, predictable, until it wasn't. Because messages like that don't shock you. They confirm something you've been politely ignoring for years. I typed back 2 words, "no problem," and I sent it before I could think about what that really meant. Because that's what I'd always done. Smoothed it over, made it easy, made myself smaller. I placed my phone face down on the table and just sat there for a second, my hands flat against the wood. Somewhere in the house, the coffee machine clicked off. Outside, a car passed slowly. Everything kept moving, like nothing had happened. But something had. Something quiet. Something final. Ethan was still watching me, not asking questions, not rushing in to fix anything. He had this way of waiting like he understood that some things don't need solutions. They need recognition. I walked over and leaned against the counter beside him. She said, "We," I said. He didn't ask what I meant. "Yeah," he replied. "That's the important part. We, not I. Not sorry. We, a shared decision disguised as a mistake." And suddenly, it all felt familiar. Too familiar. Like a pattern I'd spent years pretending not to see. Like every moment I'd been slightly out of frame. Every dinner where my seat felt temporary. Every conversation that moved on without needing me. Every time I convinced myself it didn't matter. It always mattered. I just never said it out loud. Until now. I looked back at my phone. At those 2 words I'd sent so easily. "No problem." And for the first time in my life, I realized that was the biggest lie I had ever told. History time. Because the truth is, nothing about that message started that morning. It just arrived there. Like everything else had been quietly building toward it for years. The house stayed still long after I sent that reply. No problem. 2 words. Effortless. Automatic. Dangerous in the way habits are dangerous because you stop noticing them. Ethan went back to his coffee. I went back to my laptop. At least, that's what it looked like. But the screen blurred after a few seconds, the words dissolving into shapes that meant nothing. I had been working on a campaign draft, something about preventative care, early detection, the usual language that tries to make urgency feel gentle. I stared at the tagline I'd written, "Take care of your future before it asks you to." I almost laughed, because apparently, I'd been doing the opposite my entire life. Letting the future happen to me. Letting people decide where I fit, or if I fit at all. I closed the laptop, not dramatically, just quietly. The way you close something you already know you won't come back to. Not today. There's a specific kind of silence that comes after something small but irreversible happens. Not loud, not heavy, just different. Like the air has shifted slightly, and your body notices before your mind catches up. That's what the kitchen felt like. The same table, the same light, the same Saturday morning, but I wasn't sitting in it the same way anymore. The first memory came without permission. They always do. You don't go looking for them. They show up when something finally gives them space. Graduation. May 2000. Athens, Georgia. Hot in that early summer way that sticks to your skin, but still feels like something worth celebrating. I had worked 4 years for that day. Scholarships. 2 part-time jobs. Late nights that blurred into early mornings. There wasn't anything glamorous about how I got there, but I got there. That mattered to me. I remember standing on that stage, holding my degree, scanning the crowd for my mom. not because I needed her approval, but because I wanted to see it, just once, unfiltered. I found her near the front, next to my older brother Jason. Of course, Jason had always been easy to find. He drew attention the way some people breathe without effort, without intention, without even realizing they were doing it. My mom had her phone up, smiling. Jason, turn a little there, that's perfect. Click. Another one. Click. She laughed at something he said, the kind of laugh that leans forward. That invests itself fully in the moment. I stood there for a second, still in my cap and gown, still holding the proof of 4 years of work, waiting. Not for applause, not even for recognition, just acknowledgement. She turned eventually. Oh, there you are. Not there you are. Just, oh. Like she had misplaced something and just now found it again. Come stand next to your brother. And just like that, the moment adjusted, shifted, reframed. The picture wasn't about me. It became about us, and somehow, mostly about him. On the drive home, she said it. I remember the exact tone. Warm, proud, completely sincere. You know, Jason didn't have to come today. He had meetings all week. He's exhausted. I nodded. Looking out the window, she showed up, she continued, almost to herself. That's what matters. People who show up. And I remember thinking, I've been showing up my whole life, but I didn't say it because I didn't know how to say something like that without sounding small or needy or worse, like I was asking to be measured. That was the first time I understood something I wouldn't be able to unsee. In her world, effort wasn't measured by consistency. It was measured by visibility. And Jason had always been visible. The second memory came softer, quieter, but somehow heavier. Christmas, 3 months ago. Her house. Same dining room she's had for 20 years. Same table she only fully sets on holidays. Candles. Matching plates. Everything arranged just right. Except for one thing. There's an extension piece, she adds, when there are too many people. It doesn't quite match. The wood is slightly off. The leg on the right side wobbles if you lean too hard. That's where I sit. Every year. Not assigned. Not officially. But somehow, always mine. Jason and his wife Lauren sit closest to the kitchen. Closest to her. Closest to everything that matters in that room. They talk. She listens. Really listens. Asking questions. Laughing. Leaning in. The conversation lives there. The center. Where I sit, conversations fade before they reach me. Not because anyone cuts me off. Not because anyone is rude. But because no one adjusts for my presence. If I speak, it's inserted. If I don't, nothing changes. That night, she poured wine. Lauren first, then Jason, then the guests beside them. The bottle reached the middle of the table, paused. Someone said something funny. She laughed. The bottle never made it to me. I could have asked. It would have been easy. Hey, can I get some? Simple, normal. But something in me stopped. Because asking would mean admitting I'd noticed. And noticing would mean it mattered. After dinner, I cleared my plates. No one asked me to. No one stopped me either. I stood at the sink, running water over glasses that weren't really dirty, listening to laughter from the other room. And I remember thinking, this is what invisible feels like. Not painful. No dramatics. Just quiet, consistent, unquestioned. The third memory hit harder. Because I had avoided it the longest. My wedding, June 2016. Savannah. It had been a beautiful day. Not perfect, but real. Ethan and I had built it carefully. Chosen everything. Not to impress anyone. Just to make it ours. There were 180 guests. Music. Lights. A warm night that didn't need anything extra. I remember dancing. Laughing. Moving from table to table like you're supposed to. Being present. Fully. And then, at some point, I noticed my mom. She was sitting with Jason and Lauren, leaning toward them, talking, laughing, focused. The same posture, the same attention, the same center. I didn't interrupt. I didn't want to pull her away. Not on a night that already asked so much of everyone. Later, the photographer found me. Do you want a picture with your mom? Yeah, I said, of course. But by the time we looked for her, she had stepped outside, talking, again. We could have waited. We could have gone to find her. But something in me said, don't make it a thing. So we didn't. There is no photo of just me and my mom from my wedding day. I knew that. I've always known that. But I never said it out loud. Because saying it would turn it into something real. And if it was real, then I would have to decide what it meant. Back in the kitchen, I realized I had been standing still for too long. The memories didn't feel emotional. Not the way you'd expect. No tears, no anger. Just clarity. Clean, sharp, unavoidable. Ethan walked back in from the porch. He didn't ask what I was thinking. He never does. He just stood there, waiting. Not for answers, for honesty. I looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't filter it, didn't soften it, didn't make it smaller. She didn't forget, I said. He nodded. I know. I took a breath and said the part that had been sitting somewhere deeper, the part I had never said out loud, not even to myself. She just didn't think it mattered if I was there. Silence, not uncomfortable, just full. Ethan leaned against the counter again, same posture as before. But something had shifted. Do you want to go? He asked. Not we should go. Not let's fix it. Just. Do you want to? I thought about it. Not emotionally, logically, carefully. If I didn't go, nothing would change. The story would stay exactly the same. I would stay exactly the same. If I did go, something would end. I didn't know what yet, but I knew it wouldn't be reversible. Yes, I said. And that was the moment the day actually began. We left the house earlier than we needed to. Not because we were in a rush, but because waiting felt worse. There's a certain kind of anticipation that doesn't come from excitement. It comes from knowing something is about to end, and you're the one who has to end it. The drive was quiet, not tense, not heavy, just intentional. Ethan had the radio on low, something soft and forgettable filling the space between us, but neither of us was listening. Outside, the city moved the way it always does on a Saturday night. Restaurants filling up, people walking with purpose, laughter spilling out onto sidewalks, everyone heading somewhere they had chosen to be. I watched it all through the window, and for the first time, I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. Everyone looked like they belonged exactly where they were going. No hesitation, no second guessing, no wondering if there would be a seat waiting for them. I turned slightly toward the glass, catching my reflection in the darkened window. It flickered in and out as streetlights passed over us, a face I recognized, but not one I fully understood. Not until tonight. For years, I had adjusted myself to fit into spaces that were never really mine, smiling at the right moments, speaking just enough to stay included, staying quiet enough to not disrupt anything, convincing myself that comfort was optional. That belonging was something you earned. But as the car slowed at a red light, something settled in me. Not anger, not even resentment, something colder, clearer. I didn't want that seat anymore. I just needed to see it. One last time. The Rosewood Grill, Ethan said, pulling into the street. I nodded. I could already see it ahead. Warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Large windows, the kind of place that announces itself without trying too hard. Comfortable, curated, controlled. Of course, she chose a place like this. My mother always preferred environments where everything could be arranged, where nothing happened by accident, where every detail reinforced the image she wanted to present. We parked across the street. The rain had just started light, barely noticeable, the kind that doesn't interrupt anything, just softens the edges. We didn't walk in right away. Neither of us said anything. We just stood there, looking through the window, and that's when I saw them. My mother's table sat right in the center of the room. Of course it did. She would have requested it, or someone would have requested it for her. The kind of table that could be seen from every angle, the kind that said, "This is the group that matters." There were 7 people. 7. Jason sat to her right, always her right. That had never changed. Not in 20 years, not in any room. Lauren sat beside him, relaxed, comfortable, her hand resting lightly on the table as she spoke. The others leaned in toward them. The conversation flowed in that direction, naturally, effortlessly, like it always had. And my mother? She was smiling, not politely, not socially, genuinely. The kind of smile that doesn't check itself, that doesn't perform, that just exists. I hadn't seen that smile directed at me in a long time. Then I saw it. The chair. It wasn't part of the table. Not really. It had been pulled in from somewhere else. The fabric didn't match. The angle was slightly off, turned just enough outward that it didn't fully belong to the circle. That was my seat. Not assigned, not placed, just added. An afterthought. Given form. I stared at it longer than I should have, memorizing it. The way it didn't quite align, the way it didn't quite fit, the way it existed only because it had to. And suddenly, everything made sense. It wasn't that they forgot me. It wasn't that there wasn't space. It wasn't even that they didn't care. It was simpler than that. I had never been part of the original arrangement. The seat had always been temporary. Do you want to go in? Ethan's voice was steady, grounding. I didn't answer right away, because there was a version of this night that didn't require any of this. We could leave. Right now. Get back in the car. Drive somewhere else. Anywhere else. We could sit at a quiet table. Just the two of us. Order something simple. Talk about nothing important. Let this dissolve into another story I never told. That version existed. It was easy, safe, familiar. And then, inside the restaurant, someone laughed. I didn't hear the joke. I didn't need to. My mother leaned toward Lauren, placed her hand lightly on her arm, the same gesture, the same instinct, the same connection. And something inside me clicked. Not painfully, not dramatically. Just, finally. She didn't hate me. She never had. That would have been easier. Hatred has shape. It has edges. You can push against it, respond to it, fight it. This was something else. This was absence, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't argue, the kind that simply exists. And I had spent 35 years trying to fill it. That's enough, I said quietly. Ethan didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded and opened the door. The warmth hit immediately. The smell of roasted meat, wine, something herbal in the air. The room didn't stop when we entered. No one turned dramatically. No music paused. But something shifted. Subtle. Almost invisible. The kind of shift you only notice if you're paying attention. A host at the front desk looked up. His eyes moved to Ethan. Recognition flickered. Quick. Controlled. He stepped forward immediately. Professional. Calm. Good evening, he said. Then, slight pause. Recognition settling in fully now. Mr. Carter. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. The room hadn't changed. But the gravity had. Staff moved differently. Straighter. More attentive. Not exaggerated. Not performative. Just aware. Like the room had suddenly remembered who it belonged to. And across the space, I saw it happen. Lauren noticed first. Her posture shifted. Just slightly. Her eyes moved from Ethan to me, then back again. Jason followed, mid-sentence, stopping halfway through a gesture. Understanding arrived on his face slowly, but unmistakably. And then, my mother. She turned last. She always did. And then I told her. She stopped, mid-laugh, mid-breath. Her eyes landed on me. Oh, not excitement, not confusion, recognition, followed immediately by recalculation. Emily, she said, standing halfway out of her chair. You came. Of course I did. I smiled. Not wide. Not performative. Just enough. Happy birthday, Mom. Her expression shifted again, trying to find the right version of the moment. Trying to rewrite it in real time. Yes, of course. She gestured vaguely toward the table. Toward the chair. The chair. There was some confusion with the reservation, she said quickly. We thought, well, I didn't let her finish. It's okay. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Not because it didn't matter, but because I had finally understood that it never would. Behind me, the host spoke again, lower now. Directed at Ethan. Would you prefer the private room this evening, sir? Silence. Then, the question that changed everything. We can relocate the party, if you'd like. The room didn't freeze, but it might as well have, because everyone at that table understood what that meant. This wasn't just a dinner anymore. This was a decision, and for the first time, it was mine. We left the house at 6:15, not because we needed to, but because staying any longer felt like delaying something inevitable. There are moments in life when time stops being something you move through and starts becoming something that moves toward you. This was one of them. The drive was quiet. Not the kind of silence that feels uncomfortable. Not the kind that needs to be filled. Just intentional. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the gear shift, like he always did when he was focused but calm. The radio played something soft in the background. Neither of us listened. Outside, the city carried on. Restaurants glowing with warm light, couples stepping out of cars, adjusting coats, laughing about something small, groups gathering at entrances, checking reservations, stepping into places that had already made space for them. Everyone looked like they belonged exactly where they were going. That was the thing I couldn't stop noticing. No hesitation. No second guessing. No quiet calculation of whether they were expected or tolerated. I watched them through the window as we passed. And for a moment, I wondered what that felt like. To walk into a room without checking first if there was a place for you. The light turned red. We stopped. I caught my reflection in the glass, faint, layered over the street behind me. For a second, I looked like I existed in two places at once, half inside the car, half outside in the world I was watching. I tilted my head slightly, studied my own face, the way you do when something feels unfamiliar. I looked composed, put together. The kind of woman who handled things. The kind of woman people assumed didn't get hurt by small things. And maybe that was the problem. Because the truth was, it had never been one big thing. It had been 100 small ones, quiet ones, dismissible ones. The kind you can explain away if you try hard enough. The kind that don't justify confrontation. The kind that don't leave evidence. Just patterns. And patterns are harder to fight because they don't feel like decisions. They feel like reality. We started moving again. The restaurant came into view at the end of the block. The Rosewood Grill. Warm light poured out through the front windows, stretching across the wet pavement like something inviting. The rain had started while we were driving. Light. Barely there. Just enough to soften everything. Of course she chose a place like this. My mother had always loved environments she could control. Spaces where everything could be arranged. Curated. Managed. Lighting. Seating. Guests. Every detail carefully placed to support the version of the evening she wanted to exist. And I realized, tonight had never been about forgetting me. It had been about choosing the version of the evening that worked best without me. We parked across the street. Ethan turned off the engine. Neither of us moved right away. We didn't need to say anything. We both knew this was the moment before something shifted permanently. Then he stepped out, walked around the car, opened my door. A small thing. Routine. But tonight, I noticed it differently. Because there are people in your life who make space for you without needing to be asked. And there are people who don't even notice you're missing. And once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. We crossed the street slowly. The rain touched my shoulders, my hair, my sleeves. Soft, cold, real. And then we stopped. Not at the door, but just far enough from the window to see inside. The restaurant was exactly what I expected. Warm, full, comfortable in its own identity. And there, in the center of the room, was my mother's table. Of course it was in the center. It always was. She had a way of placing herself exactly where attention would naturally settle. Not aggressively, not obviously, but deliberately. There were 7 people seated. 7. The number landed in my mind with quiet precision. Jason sat to her right. He always did. That position had never been questioned. Not once. Lauren sat beside him, leaning in slightly. Her posture relaxed, her presence easy. She was speaking. The others were listening. The energy of the table moved toward her, toward them. And my mother was glowing, not in a dramatic way, not in a way meant to impress, just genuinely at ease. Her shoulders relaxed, her smile unguarded, her attention fully invested. I hadn't seen that version of her directed at me in a long time. And then I saw it. The chair. It didn't match the others. That was the first thing. Different fabric. Slightly darker. The legs didn't align perfectly with the rest of the table. And the angle was off. Not enough to look wrong at a glance, but enough that once you noticed it, you couldn't stop seeing it. It wasn't part of the circle. It was attached to it. Barely. That was my seat. Not chosen. Not placed with intention. Just added. An adjustment. A correction. Something brought in after the fact to fix an inconvenience. I stared at it longer than I should have. long enough to understand something I had been avoiding for years. It wasn't that I had been excluded. It was that I had never been included to begin with. There's a difference, a painful one, because exclusion implies you were meant to be there. And something went wrong. But this was structure, design. I was not part of the original plan. The chair was proof of that. Emily. Ethan's voice was quiet. Do you want to go in? The question wasn't about the restaurant. It was about everything. I didn't answer right away. Because there was still another version of this night. A simple one. We could leave. Get back in the car. Drive somewhere else. Somewhere small. Quiet. Unimportant. We could sit at a table for two. Order something we didn't have to think about. Talk about work. Travel. Anything that didn't matter. We could let this night dissolve into something forgettable. I had done that before. Many times. Let things pass. Let moments go. Let patterns continue. Because confronting them felt bigger than I was willing to handle. And then, inside the restaurant, someone laughed. I didn't hear what was said, but I saw my mother react. She leaned toward Lauren, placed her hand lightly on her arm. The same gesture. I recognized it instantly. She used to do that to me. When I was younger, when something I said amused her, when I had her attention, it was small, almost nothing, but it meant everything. And now, it belonged to someone else. Not taken, not stolen, just redirected. That's when it happened. Not a surge of anger, not a wave of sadness, something quieter. Final. She didn't hate me. That thought landed with surprising clarity. There had never been cruelty. No intentional harm. No decision to push me away. Which meant there had never been anything to fix. No argument to win. No conversation to have. Because you can't argue with absence. You can't negotiate your way into being seen by someone who has already decided not to look. And I had spent years trying. That's enough, I said softly. Ethan didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded and reached for the door. The moment we stepped inside, the warmth wrapped around us. The smell hit first. Roasted meat, garlic, wine, something herbal layered underneath. Then the sound, low conversation, soft laughter, cutlery against plates. The room continued exactly as it had before we entered. But something shifted. Not dramatically, subtly, like the air had recalibrated. The host looked up. His eyes landed on Ethan. Recognition. Immediate. Controlled. He straightened slightly. Stepped forward. Good evening. A pause. Then, Mr. Carter. And just like that, the entire equation changed. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. Ifetit. Staff moved differently. More alert. More precise. Not exaggerated. Not performative. Just aware. Because the room had just remembered who it belonged to. And across the restaurant, I saw it ripple. Lauren noticed first. Her posture shifted. Hand still. Her eyes moved to Ethan. Then to me. Then back again. Jason followed. Mid-sentence. Stopping halfway through a gesture. Understanding arrived slowly, but unmistakably. And then, my mother turned. She always turned last. And then I said, she stopped. Her eyes landed on me. And for a split second, there was no expression at all. Just recognition. Followed immediately by adjustment. Emily, she said, standing halfway, smiling. You came. Of course I did. I smiled back. Happy birthday, Mom. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be included. I was just present. And everything that came next was going to change that forever. For a moment, no one spoke. Not at the table, not around it. Not even the room, it seemed, though I knew that wasn't true. Because the question had already been asked. Would you like us to relocate the party? It hung there, invisibly, but heavy enough that everyone felt it. My mother didn't understand it immediately. Not fully. She heard the words, but she hadn't processed what they meant. Not yet. Jason had. I saw it in his face. The shift. The recalculation. He looked at Ethan, then at the host, then back at the table. His mind moved quickly. It always had. He was assembling the pieces, fitting them together. And when it clicked, it showed. Lauren felt it next. Not through logic. Through instinct. Her posture tightened. Her fingers curled slightly around the edge of the table. She didn't understand the full picture yet, but she knew something had just changed. And then, my mother. She looked at me, really looked at me. Not the surface version, not the polite, social glance she'd perfected over years. Something deeper, searching, because for the first time, she was trying to understand the moment from my position, and she didn't have a script for that. Emily, she said again, softer now, less certain. We didn't expect you. There it was. Not we forgot. Not there was a mistake. Just, we didn't expect you. Truth has a way of slipping out when pressure builds. I nodded. I know. No accusation. No edge. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that made it worse. Because anger can be dismissed. Defensiveness can be argued. But calm forces people to face themselves. Behind me, the host shifted his weight slightly. Still composed. Still professional. Waiting. Because this wasn't his decision. Not anymore. Ethan hadn't spoken yet. He didn't need to. His presence alone had already rewritten the structure of the room, and everyone knew it. My mother glanced at him, then back at me. Emily, honey, we can fix this, she said quickly. There's always room, She gestured toward the chair. That chair. The one that didn't belong. The one that had been waiting. Not for me, but for the idea of me. Something inside me shifted again. Not painful. Not emotional. Clear. I looked at the chair, then back at her. You already did, I said. She blinked, confused. I don't understand. I know, I said gently, and that was the moment it happened. The moment where everything she had always assumed started to break. Because for 35 years, I had adapted, adjusted, accepted, made things easier, smiled when things felt off, said it's fine when it wasn't, filled in the gaps no one else noticed. And tonight, for the first time, I wasn't doing that. The host spoke again, quietly. Sir, he said to Ethan, we can prepare the private dining room immediately. A pause, measured, careful. Or, we can rearrange this table. That word. Rearrange. It landed differently this time. Because now, everyone understood what it meant. This wasn't about adding a chair. This was about removing people. About deciding who stayed and who didn't. My mother's breath caught slightly. She heard it now. Fully. Her eyes flicked to the others at the table. Jason. Lauren. The guests. The room she had built. The evening she had planned. Everything she had arranged. Was suddenly fragile. Because it could be undone. With a single decision. My decision. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one in control of the room. Emily, she said again. But this time, there was something else in her voice. Not authority. Not certainty. Something closer to hesitation. She didn't know what I was going to do. And that was new. Ethan finally spoke. Whatever you prefer, he said. Not to the host. To me. Simple. Direct. The power wasn't implied. It was handed to me. Openly. Without pressure. Without expectation. Just choice. I looked at the table again. 7 people. Comfortable. Settled. Belonging. And 1 chair that didn't. For years, that had been enough. A place to sit. A way to stay included. Even if it didn't feel right. Even if it never quite fit. But standing there, I realized something. That chair had never been for me. It had been for their convenience. A way to say, see, you're included. Without ever actually making space. And I had accepted it. Again, and again, and again. Because it was easier than asking for more. Easier than admitting it wasn't enough. Easier than risking the answer. But now, there was no risk. Because I already knew the truth. I took a breath, not to steady myself. Just to mark the moment. Then I turned to the host. No, I said. The word landed softly. But it didn't move. The host nodded once, waiting for the rest. I glanced back at my mother. She was watching me, completely still. For the first time, she wasn't trying to manage the situation. She was trying to understand it. It's her birthday, I continued. A small pause. They should stay. Silence. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. Understanding. Immediate. And devastating. Because what I had just done was worse than anything else I could have chosen. I hadn't taken anything from her. I hadn't exposed her. I hadn't embarrassed her. I hadn't forced her to explain. I had simply refused to participate. And in doing that, I showed her everything. Showed her the table, the chair, the pattern, the truth. Without saying a single word about it, her lips parted slightly. But nothing came out, because there was nothing she could say that would change what had already been revealed. You can argue with accusations. You can defend against anger. You can deny intention, but you cannot respond to clarity. Ethan nodded. Private room, he said calmly. The host stepped aside immediately. This way, he said. I turned one last time, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it clearly. The table, the people, the space I had spent years trying to belong to, and for the first time, I saw it exactly as it was. Not something I had lost, something that had never been mine. Happy birthday, Mom, I said, and I meant it. Not politely, not automatically, honestly, because for the first time, her happiness no longer required my absence. It just existed, separate from me, and that was enough. She looked at me, really looked, and in her eyes, I saw it. Not guilt. Not yet. Something earlier. The moment before a story changes. The second when someone realizes they've misunderstood something important for a very long time. But that realization was hers to carry. Not mine. I turned and walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just forward. Ethan beside me. The host leading the way. And behind me, the table remained exactly where it was. 7 people. 1 empty chair. And a silence that would last far longer than the dinner. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. The private dining room was quieter than the rest of the restaurant. Not completely silent, but insulated. Like the noise of the main room belonged to another world. The door closed behind us softly. No dramatic shift. No sudden relief. Just distance. Ethan pulled out my chair. I sat down. The table was already set. 2 glasses, 2 plates, 2 seats. Nothing extra, nothing temporary. And for a moment, I just looked at it. Because something about this felt unfamiliar. Not the room. Not the restaurant. The certainty. No one had to adjust anything to make space for me here. I didn't have to ask. Didn't have to wait. Didn't have to check if I was included. I already was. A server entered quietly. Poured water. Placed menus. Left without interrupting the silence. Ethan sat across from me. Rested his hand lightly over mine. Not squeezing. Not reassuring. Just there. And somehow, that was enough. We didn't talk about what just happened. There was nothing to explain. Because moments like that don't need analysis. They settle on their own. But even without seeing it, I could picture the other room. My mother still sitting at that table. The same table she had arranged so carefully. The same guests. The same lighting. But something would have changed. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone could point to. But in the space between people. Jason would be quiet. He always went quiet when something didn't fit neatly into his understanding of how things worked. When something required reevaluation, Lauren would be holding her glass, not drinking, thinking, replaying. Because people like her notice shifts in power faster than they understand them. And my mother, she would be sitting there with something she couldn't fix. That was the part that mattered. Not embarrassment, not confrontation, uncertainty. Because for the first time, she had seen the situation from the outside. Seen the chair, seen the table. Seen me. Not as someone inside the room, but as someone who had been standing just outside it all along. And worse, she had seen that I knew it. There's no script for that. No polite response. No graceful recovery. Because you can't undo awareness. You can't go back to not knowing. I picked up the menu. Looked at it without really reading. Across from me, Ethan did the same. Normal. Calm. As if this was just another dinner. And in a way, it was. That was the strangest part. Nothing had exploded. No one had argued. No voices had been raised. But something had ended. Quietly. Completely. And endings like that don't ask for attention. They just stay. We didn't rush dinner. That was the first thing I noticed. There was no urgency. No need to leave quickly. No need to prove anything. Time slowed. The food arrived. We ate. We talked about things that had nothing to do with what just happened. Work, a trip we had been postponing, Mrs. Langley next door, and her broken mailbox latch. Normal things. And for the first time that night, I realized something strange. This felt more real than the table I had just walked away from. Not bigger, not more important, just honest. When we left, we didn't go back through the main dining room. There was a side exit near the private section. Ethan opened the door. Cool air rushed in. Outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement still held the reflection of the lights behind us. I paused for a second, not to look back, but because I didn't feel the need to. For years, I had walked away from rooms like that, still looking over my shoulder, still wondering, still hoping something would change. Tonight, I didn't, because nothing needed to. We got into the car. The city moved around us again, quiet, steady, unaware. And for once, I wasn't replaying anything. No second guessing, no analyzing, no rewriting conversations in my head. Just stillness. The kind that only comes when something finally ends the way it was supposed to. The next morning, my brother called. His voice was careful, measured. I didn't know, he said. I believed him. That wasn't the point. Later that day, my mother called. She tried to explain. Words like misunderstanding, confusion, timing, carefully arranged, just like everything else. And for the first time, I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. Didn't push back. Didn't try to make her see it the way I saw it, because I finally understood something that changed everything. You can't explain your way into being seen by someone who has already decided not to look. I know you believe that, I told her. And then I ended the call. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. A week later, we had dinner at home. 2 plates, 2 chairs. No adjustments. No extra seats pulled in at the last second. Nothing temporary. I sat down, looked at the table, then at Ethan, and it hit me. This seat was mine. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I chose it. There's something people don't tell you about quiet pain. It doesn't come with shouting or broken glass. It comes with things like an empty seat, a missing name on a list, a moment where no one notices you're not there. And because it's quiet, you carry it longer. You tell yourself it's fine. You adjust. You shrink. You stay. Until one day, you don't. What I learned that night wasn't about my mother, or my brother, or that table. It was about something much simpler. You don't need to fight for a seat that was never meant for you. And walking away from it isn't losing. It's the first time you finally understand you are allowed to stand up all along. So here's the question you should ask yourself, and answer honestly. Is there a seat in your life you've been trying to fit into for far too long? If there is, maybe it's time to stop adjusting and start choosing